In a post on X, Trump aide Peter Navarro renewed his attack on India while targeting social media platform X for fact-checking his post. In his latest post, he accused India of buying Russian oil in a movie called Blood Money and added that India didn't buy such large quantities before the war. And joining me now to discuss this further is Ashley Tellis of Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Ashley Tellis, thank you so much for joining me on Global Lens today. Let me start by asking you, what has led to this change in tone for President Trump?
You know, the president is a pretty mercurial personality, and I always anticipated that just as he turned very quickly against India, he could do an about turn with equal felicity. And in the last 48 hours, he seems to have done exactly that. Now, we don't know whether any of this is enduring, but he certainly seems to have realized, especially after the summit with Prime Minister Modi had with Putin and Xi, that things might have been coming to a somewhat uncomfortable impasse. And that, more than anything else, I think, accounts for his change of mind.
Do you believe and do you feel that the bureaucracy in Washington, top members of the Republican and also Democrats, also believe that they were losing India?
I think there's certainly a concern on the Hill about the general tenor of Trump's policies. And everyone has been looking with varying degrees of discomfort about how he's treated India in the last few months. But what I find striking is the silence on the part of members of Congress, on the part of members of the Indian American community, and other constituencies that in the past have been very strong champions of the US-India relationship. So to the degree that there's a change of mind, I think it has been motivated more by the influence of certain key members in his cabinet, in particular Secretary of State Rubio, than any outside forces.
Just to emphasize on that point again, you said that the silence on the part of the Indian American congressman is surprising. Do you believe that this is because they see the politics of America changing and it's very difficult to completely disagree with what Trump is doing?
I think he has certainly cowed the Congress as an effective countervailing institution. And that applies to members on both sides of the aisle. So even those Republicans on the Hill who disagree with President Trump essentially realize that it's prudent to keep silent because he has such terrific control over his own party that they could end up in real trouble with Trump's political machine. The Democrats, on the other hand, really recognize that they are powerless, that even if they were to criticize anything that Trump does, and they've been doing it in bits and pieces, it's not likely to have any impact on his decision-making. So for different reasons, both Republicans and Democrats, whether they are Indian American or not, have essentially been silenced in the face of his onslaught.
Right. Till now, who do you think was driving Donald Trump's decision-making, his posts on India, some of them very, very angry, calling the relationship with India a one-sided disaster, and who do you think has possibly helped in course correction?
Well, I think the person driving it was certainly Donald Trump himself. I mean, this is not a presidency which is marked by a team of equals. He does not have anyone in the cabinet who considers himself or herself independent enough to offer Trump an opinion that may run counter to that of the president. So Trump is in the driver's seat. I think he pays a lot of attention to the media. And so the images that came out of the summit between Putin, Xi, and Modi certainly had an impact. And you saw that tweet that he put out, which bemoaned the loss of Russia and India to China. And it was curious because it did not reveal any sense of responsibility for what he might have done to have brought about that outcome. But I think some sobriety prevailed, and he seems to have at least stepped back a bit Now, what nobody knows is whether this is going to be enduring, as I said before. But it certainly represents an opportunity, and I think Prime Minister Modi has attempted to take advantage of it.
Right. How should India now engage with the Trump administration, considering that this is not a permanent sign of how things will be?
So you have to understand that India has been engaging with the Trump administration actually quite consistently throughout this summer. That even when things looked really horrid, India maintained its lines of communication to the administration. There were conversations between the Indian embassy and administration officials. There are conversations between New Delhi and Washington. So it's not the absence of communication or the absence of engagement. What India has been running up against is essentially a brick wall, which is defined by the president's prejudices. And until those prejudices shift, I don't think there is room for some kind of a breakthrough. Now, we are beginning to see what I think hopefully will be the first signs of Trump's rethinking of his policy towards India. And if this leads to revisiting his views on India and the Russian oil trade, India and the trade deal, then I think we may still be able to salvage something that makes for a more workmanlike relationship for the next few months and possibly the next 3 years.
Right. Do you also feel that some of the positive statements that have come from President Trump was also the result of the slowdown in the jobs market? Experts have been saying that the labor market is stalling because of tariffs. And do you think that has also had an impact on President Trump's thinking and approach?
I seriously doubt that. I mean, there is no doubt that the US economy is slowing. There is actually a very interesting emerging debate about whether we are already in a recession or at least in the first phases of a recession. But I don't think there is a causal relationship between what is happening objectively in the US economy and Trump's change of mind. I think his positions on India have been really determined by his whims. And as his whims change, his policy changes. Over the long term, that may mutate substantially. That is, if we really get into a deep recession and the American consumer begins to feel real pain, then the causal relationship between the state of the economy and his policy towards India and other countries may begin to have an impact. But for the moment, I doubt there is any causality between those two relationships.
Do you expect India now to have a stronger hand in the negotiations? Do you expect some sort of breakthrough and deal soon?
Well, I don't think India has a stronger hand or a weaker hand than the one it's had before. It has already put its best foot forward with respect to the trade negotiations. Now it remains for Trump to accept it. For Trump, though, the big question is Russian oil. And I think India has moved quite a bit towards reassuring him that it has already been tapering the purchases of Russian oil, primarily because of market conditions. And were the United States to be more generous in terms of offering American energy, India would be more than comfortable buying even more American energy than it does today. So India has already moved substantially, even on addressing his concerns about energy purchases. And my expectation is that in the months ahead, India's purchases of Russian energy will actually drop further, as they have been for the last two months at least. So it all depends now on whether Trump is willing to take yes for an answer and move on to put this very sorry episode of strained relations behind us.
Right. Finally, how do you think the tension and the strong rhetoric of the last few months is going to impact the India-US relationship in the long term? Do you see the ties overall remaining the same? Or do you feel that this episode is going to change the nature of the India-US relationship and throw in more caution?
So I would say you have to distinguish between two periods. The Trump administration, that is the next 3.5 years of life that this administration has, and then the life after this administration. when one looks at the life after this administration, I think the odds are that the US-India relationship will remain quite solid because both countries need each other for different reasons, but for truly enduring ones. So I'm optimistic when one thinks about the long-term trajectory of US-India relations. But for the next 3.5 years, I am much more cautious because Trump's temperament is a permanent feature and will remain dominant for the next 3.5 years. So I expect there to be episodes of rockiness, episodes of scratchiness. But I think India will manage. I've been really impressed by how disciplined Prime Minister Modi has been in dealing with President Trump's tantrums over the last few months. And if it continues to stay that course, I think India will survive the next 3.5 years. But I cannot with confidence say that they'll be happy times.
And one more question, if I were to ask, do you expect more sanctions? We're looking at positivity, friendly statements right now, but Scott Bessent is saying that more sanctions, more tariffs are being considered to cripple the Russian economy. Do you think India could have more coming its way?
I certainly think it could, because again, even though the Russia policy of the Trump administration is not very clear or transparent, it seems that the administration is moving in the direction of trying to find new ways of strangling Putin's ability to wage this war in Ukraine. If that turns out to be the policy that the administration pursues for the next several months, then I imagine that various kinds of secondary sanctions are being contemplated and will come India's way, among many other countries. And so if that is the case, then I think there will certainly be impacts on India that could be quite significant.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Ashley Tellis, for joining us on Global Lens, giving us your view on the first positive statements and positive signaling between Trump and Prime Minister Modi and what lies ahead. We're taking a short break, but coming up for